interesting perspective. Credit formation, capital formation, important. Before I continue, I could have sworn I saw Colin Bullock, or chairman of the planning. Oh, there you are. Didn't like the front row, sir? Air condition. Welcome. Thank you. So we're whipping along. Next on the program, we have Professor Densil Williams. And Professor Williams is a professor of international business and the executive director of the Mona School of Business and Management at UWI Mona campus. He has a PhD in international business and strategy from the Manchester Business School, University of Manchester in the UK. He was a Jamaica Government Exhibition Scholar, a Jamaica Flour Mill Scholar, a Lome 4 Scholar, and a Commonwealth Scholar. Now, if I knew there were all these scholarships, I mean, I could have done a little better. But yes, well done. In 2006, he has published, since his first academic appointment in 2006, he has published over 50 refereed papers on economic development, small firm strategy, and economic competitiveness in academic journals and conference proceedings. Please join me in welcoming Professor Williams to the podium.
Also recognize Mrs. Favor Williams, Deputy Spokesperson for the Opposition on Finance, Mr. Richard Powell, the Chairman, the CEO and President of the Victoria Mutual Group, Mr. Resworth Burchison, who is the Managing Director of Prime Asset Management. Let me also recognize the heads of agencies, Mr. MacDonald, President of JCC, and Mr. Mahfood, President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, and other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Let me firstly congratulate Victoria Mutual Group for this very important forum. I'm happy that Minister Phillips is here, so you will hear a lot of the things that you're saying, and hopefully he will implement them. So congratulations for this important forum. I'm just going to make a few comments really on strategies for growth, and I'm pretty sure you'll hear much more comprehensively from the Minister as he outlines the growth agenda. But before I get into that, I want to make a very important statement, and that has to do with growth in Jamaica. Let me firstly state that we really don't have a growth problem per se. Jamaican economy, we don't have a problem growing the economy. We can always grow the economy. The economy is always growing. The challenge that you have is to grow the economy at a sustainable rate of roughly about 2% and above. That's really the big challenge. The truth is that you get a 0.8% growth, etc. And that can come if tourism grows, if agriculture grows, and those things. You will get growth, and that's not difficult to have. So the real issue for getting growth is how you get growth at the 2% and above on a sustained basis. And that is really what we're concerned about. So what I'll be identifying today in a very short time are some critical growth projects, I think, that could start the momentum for growth. I don't want to detract from Minister's presentation because I'm pretty sure he will outline the overall framework for growth, etc., and I don't want an overlap. So what I'm going to do is to speak specifically about some projects that we could have for growth. But before I get there, if we could look at the slide, who is doing this for me? Oh, great, thank you. Just a bit of the state of the nation. Those are some key economic variables there that talk about our fiscal balance at March 2015. We look at our fiscal balance, we look at our debt, we look at our NIR, we look at our debt to GDP, and we look at unemployment and all those figures. And we would see where they are today compared to where they were 2013. So if we look at the state of the nation, really, it is saying that while things are sort of stabilizing, there's still a lot that needs to be done, especially getting down that unemployment figure. It's critical to get down that unemployment figure. And so there are a number of things that I think that can be done within the short, medium, and long term in order to deal with the growth issue on a sustained basis, but actually to start the momentum in the short term. And my first point is really to go back to the PIOJ Growth Inducement Strategy of 2011 and look at a number of the critical projects in that strategy. I still think that we need to find a way to implement the ideas that were actually presented in that strategy. It's a very comprehensive document. It's a good document, and a number of the things can be done in the short term, and I think we should get there as well. Importantly, there needs to be infrastructure improvement in key areas, roads, building, using NHT resources to build more houses, using resources to put in irrigation in agriculture, a number of these things. The items in red there are referring to the responsible persons, if you wish. So the Ministry of Transport and Works and Housing, Ministry of Agriculture, the private sector can take up those opportunities. Similarly, if you look at agriculture, one of the things that we need to do in agriculture is to really recalibrate our trade, international trading arrangements. And in so doing, we need to look at a significant way the use of the upper tariff bounds in the WTO agreements and make sure that we can substitute a number of the imported products with local production. Critical for short-term growth, especially in AgriParks initiative. I think that's a good initiative that really needs some further attention, and we can discuss the details of these later on, but I'm just giving some highlights. But one of the things that you look at, for example, is the importation of red peas. Through the AgriParks, you can grow red peas. You can grow a significant amount of red peas, for example, but we're not using the WTO rules in a judicious way, and therefore we hide behind them to say why we need to import a lot. But there are ways that you can actually get around those. All right. There's also the need for increase in non-traditional exports, and again, JAMPRO, the Ministry of Agriculture, is important to actually look at those initiatives. Importantly, we have seen the privatization of the Kingston Container Terminal, but we now need to start seeing the work happening. We have seen the agreement that has been signed, but we need to start seeing the work on the dredging of the harbor and also all the other attendant activities to get some production going there. In the medium term, MSTEM going to have to play a critical role in terms of energy solutions. We have to reduce the cost of energy. That is a critical element in the drive for improved international competitiveness, and MSTEM and all the persons who are working on that really need to look at that. We need to build international competitiveness, especially focusing on the cost of doing business. While our ranking has improved tremendously in the ease of doing business over the last year, if you take a critical look at the indicator, what you would recognize is that a lot of the improvements that we have gotten are based on regulatory changes. We now need to see changes that are impacting directly on the operations, the day-to-day operations of business. So the Ministry of Investment, Industry and Commerce, I think, has some role to play there. We need social intervention to motivate entrepreneurial spirit in a number of areas, especially in the creative industries. So again, the JAMPRO, the Social Development Commission, the Ministry of Youth and Culture, they do have a critical role to play. We also need to identify new sectors for growth. We need to look at creative industries, the BPO sector, the agro-processing sector to move up the value chain. Again, I talk about the MIIC and private sector partnership would be critical in that regard. Can you go to the next slide? In the long term, the real critical issue is for us to improve the productivity in the country. That's a critical issue that we have to face. It's not going to happen overnight, but as you know, that Keynes said some time ago, if we, in the long run, we're all dead, and we don't want to be dead. So what we want to do is to make sure that we get some momentum going in the short term. And while we're getting the momentum in the short term, we must do something to improve the long-term prospect, sustain that growth. And in order to sustain that growth, we're talking about critical improvement in productivity, in reform of our educational system, reform in the workforce practices. So again, I'm talking about the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor, universities, colleges, vocational training institutes. They all have a role to play in terms of the improvement in productivity. greater integration of the logistics hub into the wider clusters of the Jamaican economy. There's no doubt that this idea of a logistics-centered economy is real and it can deliver benefits. But what we now need to see is how that is going to be integrated in the rest of the economy. We don't want the logistics project to be an enclave where only a small sector of the economy benefits from it, as we have seen in a number of other industries where it becomes enclave and only a few people get the benefits out of it. So we're talking about long-term, looking at how we integrate that project into the wider economy. There's also the issue of increased law and order and social balance. That's critical. Investors will tell you, Mr. Mahfoud is here, a number of investors are here. If you get a lawless society, people are not going to invest their money. That's the reality. So we really need to talk about how we do increase law and order. So Ministry of Justice, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Youth and Culture, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, they are critical if we're going to talk about the long-term growth of the economy. So just to summarize, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at this particular picture there, what we're looking at are various areas where you can have some tangible projects to invest in. Basically, you have energy, we have the energy projects, we have the integrated resort development project, we have the agro-parks initiative, we have the infrastructure development, we have logistics hub. If you take the value of those projects over time, what you're recognizing is that if we were to get these projects going in any single year, even starting them now, we're talking about roughly about a $4.2 billion investment in the economy as we speak. So that is critical. We can take away some of these, the private sector persons are here who are looking business opportunities. They need to start wrapping their heads around how we get a size of these projects so we can actually start investment in the domestic economy to actually drive the growth. So in closing, what I would say is that Jamaica has the foundation for driving high levels of economic growth. There's no doubt about that one. We have the foundation. Critically, if you look at the major projects, as I said before, my own calculation suggests that if we were to get those projects off, investing about $4.2 billion in the economy, we're talking about an induced impact on the economy of over $17.7 billion US in terms of just getting those projects off the ground. That's significant for your growth. That's very, very important. So, if you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, there's really, the fundamental problem is how we coordinate these various initiatives among the public and private institutional partners for growth. The challenge that we have is really not to find the growth projects per se. The challenge we really have is one of management and leadership of the initiatives that need to drive growth in the economy. Thank you very much.